Welcome back, book lovers, to another episode of Dad and Daughter Reads, a book club podcast. This is episode 10, and today we're diving into the next section of Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor, chapters 29 through 38. We're in the home stretch now, and there's a lot to unpack. But before we dive in, let me introduce my co-host, the queen of calling plot twists before they happen, and somehow making every book discussion twice as entertaining, Miranda. Before we start breaking these chapters down, how was your week? No Lady Gaga sightings in New York City?
No Lady Gaga sightings, unfortunately. She was rumored all over X to be at the party I was at on Friday night in Brooklyn, but she did not show up, which I wasn't super surprised about because I'm sure she's tired. She's doing a lot of SNL stuff. But it was still a fun week. Danced to her new album, hung out with friends, getting back into a nice routine of meditation and yoga and the gym. I'm very glad that the weather is getting nicer up here. It's still pretty up and down, but it hasn't been in the 30s in a couple weeks, so that's all that matters to me. How was your week?
Another boring week for me. I was just working and going to the gym and hanging out. Didn't do much of nothing. What have you been reading?
So I'm still trudging through Witches of El Paso. It's really, really good, and it's getting exciting because the main character in the current time period is getting her magical abilities, and I love all the indigenous, Mexican, Spanish historical references. Just having to find the time to sit down and read. But now that it's nicer outside, I can read on my breaks at work and stuff, and I feel more inclined to sit outside and read. So picking that up, I did finish listening to the last few minutes of This Is Not About You, which was very good. I feel like I talked about it because I practically really only had 10 minutes left of the book to finish. And then I also started and finished Chelsea Handler's new book, I'll Have What She's Having, which I loved. It was very funny and insightful, and I highly recommend to all women in their 20s and of all ages. It's very inspiring for me because she's really living the life I want to live someday. So really, really loved that book. Really, I highly suggest it. How was your reading week?
So I'm still reading The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. I'm on book 5, which is the novel. That leaves 2 more novellas after that. This series is a lot of fun. I like it a lot. It's very well written. It won some awards, and I believe she turned down to be nominated for some awards on some of the books because she wanted other people to win or other people to have that ability to possibly win. Mm-hmm. So it's a very good series. It's really good. The main character is just so funny and great because all he wants to do is consume media. He has all these TV shows files backed up inside of him, and he just wants to watch them. But the stupid humans keep trying to get themselves killed, and he has to help them. So it's so funny. But after I finish that series, I'm probably going to blow my whole March TBR up and just read as many novellas as I can. I'm actually going to read Benti, which is also by Nnedi Okorafor, How to Win the Time War, and then The Monk and Robot Duology, which is 2 books, 2 novellas, A Psalm for the Wild-Built and A Prayer for the Crown-Shy. I've heard those are really good too. I think they're by Becky Chambers. Well, I was going to ask you, you say that the book, What She's Having, I'll Have What She's Having by Chelsea Handler. Yeah. Is that she's living the life you want to live someday. What is that exactly?
Oh,
can you elaborate?
She's just I don't know. She's just out there. She's just traveling and doing whatever she wants. She's unmarried and doesn't have kids, just kind of doing her thing, just unapologetically, living her life. But at the same time, she's done a lot of internal work on her. That's why it's so insightful. She's done a lot of the book itself. She writes a lot of notes. It feels like she wrote it to her inner child, to her younger self who had all of these dreams of being this certain person one day. And it's such she always gets a lot of backlash for being very, loud and opinionated and brash. Yeah. And also a lot of people call her a child hater and all this stuff because she doesn't want children. But in this book, she actually talks about how she loves children. She actually has children all around her. She got really, really close to one of her ex's kids, and they still have a relationship to this day. So she kind of debunks all of that too as well. Just this whole idea of what it's like what we should be doing in society, especially as women, like what we're expected to do. She just kind of blew all that up. So she's just
Oh, okay.
living however she wants to live. And she's also very much like, I'm always trying to be generous. Like every time I go on vacation, I like bring my family and I give them things and I'm all this stuff. But at the same time, she's like, but my family also fucking annoys me and all. I don't know. She's just so funny and she's so like caring and generous without that stereotypical way of you thinking that she is. And so I just like that she's just created this whole life that she just wanted to live, like, and doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks or says about her, and she doesn't care. And she's put in a lot of work on herself too.
She has the money to do all that though too, which is something that a lot of people don't have. But
but the way that
difficult to travel a lot.
But the way that she did, because she didn't come from money, so she's not like a nepo baby. She didn't come from money.
Oh no. I mean, I know she had a TV show in the like mid 2000s because I've watched it before and I like her. I think she's funny.
But it's inspired, which of course she has a lot of money, absolutely. But she talks about like how she made it happen. Like she drove cross country at 19 by herself to California and then just worked all these crazy jobs. And the way that she talked about it too, because she was working at a temp agency and then she like picked up the phone and I guess she was temping as an assistant for like a lawyer. And she got on the phone and he was like, when are we gonna fire that dumb blonde like assistant? And she was like, I guess I'll just go then because you're talking to me, you're talking to her. And she left and she was like, had it been another day, had I not been confident, feeling like a certain way, had I been like down in the dumps, like it really would have hurt me. But she was like, but because I was in this frame of mind, like this good frame of mind, she was like, okay, well, that's just something that I'm not supposed to be doing. So I need to go do something else. So I like the way that she reframes things in that way. And so because of that, she was like, okay, I'm just going to keep working my ass off to do exactly what it is that I want to do. And she did, which I think was really cool. Like her just kind of be like, because she came from like a pretty, I don't know, her parents were, trouble with her parents and this, that, and the other, and baby of the family. And so all of her family kind of thinks she's a fuck up and she's like the most successful out of all of them type of deal. So she worked really, really hard to get to where she was. And then also just, like I said, she just kind of said,
like a Zelu in that way.
Yeah, I guess so. But instead, and there were a lot of times where she would get into trouble and she wasn't doing well. And in the book, she talks about how Jane Fonda invited her over for dinner and was like, hey, you acted like an asshole at my birthday party and you really need to get it together. And Chelsea was like, well, fuck. Like Jane Fonda is telling me to get it together. I'm going to get it together. And so she was like, and she was right. And I respected her for that honesty. Like she cared for me enough to tell me to come to dinner and be honest with me about who I was as my character. And instead of dwelling on it, I did something about it. She like went to therapy and like worked on herself and did all these things. So I like that. She's just very, very, very insightful. So
yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So recommend it, especially like I said, if you're a woman in your 20s or any age, because she's almost 50, which is also why I'm like, damn, she's like 50 years old, just like doing whatever the hell she wants. I love it. She doesn't care. I just love it. Like I hope that's what I'm trying to be when I'm 50.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the social media book buzz. We actually have something to talk about this week. Sorry, Grandma. But Oathbound by Tracy Dion. So this is the third book of the Legendborn cycle, which is a young adult series. The first two being Legendborn and Bloodmarked. So the issue is, and some Barnes and Nobles didn't have it in stock, and most of them put it on a small table in the back of the store. And this has upset a lot of people. People are upset because they think this is a brand new book. It came out last Tuesday. And there's a lot of hype for it, apparently, at least on Book Talk and in the Black community, because the author is a Black woman and the main character is a young Black woman. And I read the first two books back in 2023, and it is a good series. This is the one I've talked about it before. I think this is the one where the main character's Bree, and she goes to this it's like it's her last year of high school, or maybe she's a junior, but she gets in this program where she goes and she gets to do a year at this college and set in North Carolina. And there's this secretive group of white kids that are all descendants of King Arthur and the Round Table, right? I think I've talked about it before, but that's what the gist of the story is. But there's much more to it than that, because she has a magic ability, and all the women in her family, and it goes all the way back to how she got that. And she has dreams of her ancestors all the way back into slavery and how they're all connected together. So there's a lot of that in there as well. And it's really a good series. But I was thinking maybe it wasn't as popular or selling as much as some people thought. And maybe that's why the books weren't put up in the front. But when I went to look into it, both books were on the New York bestsellers list. There's a possible TV adaptation coming for it. And the first book won some awards like Best Young Adult Books, School Library Journal, Award for New Talent, Coretta Scott King Award, Best Fiction for Young Adults for YALSA, Ignite Award, Best Novel for Young Adults. So it should have some power there. You know, I mean, New York Times bestsellers list, that's a big one in and of itself. So why wouldn't Barnes & Noble put the book at the front of the store? Is it because it's a Black author? Is it because it's a young adult book? Could be those reasons. But Barnes & Noble also had an exclusive collector's edition of the book. So it's really weird that they wouldn't kind of put it up at the front of the store on a table, right? I know my local Barnes & Noble, I saw it this weekend, and it was on a small table near the YA section in the back of the store. I don't know. My thoughts are that maybe the publisher didn't push the book enough, because the only place I've really ever heard of this, and I heard of it the first time when I read it in 2023, was on TikTok. I didn't really see it anywhere else. So maybe the publisher's not pushing it as much as they should. And I don't know if publishers do these deals like where, if you think about the grocery store, I don't know, whoever makes chips, Lay's chips, they will like give the grocery store a deal and sell their chips a little cheaper if they put them like on the end cap for a couple weeks or whatever. So that allows the grocery store to make a little extra money on their profit, right? So I don't know if publishers do those kinds of deals with booksellers or not. Like, okay, we'll, you know, either pay you this much to put them in the front of the store on a big table or on an end cap or whatever. I don't know if that happens in the publishing industry, but that could be part of it. I don't know. But I think the majority of the issue does rest on the publisher here. I'm not saying Barnes & Noble shouldn't take any kind of blame for it or whatever. Maybe it's like 60-40 on the publisher, 60 and 40 on Barnes & Noble or the bookseller. I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but it's a lot of people are making a big deal. There's lots of videos on it on TikTok recently and Book Talk.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I feel like you're probably right. I feel like because Barnes & Noble is such a big store, like corporate, everybody goes to Barnes & Noble, they probably do have, I feel like publishers do probably go to these places and be like, okay, like you guys need to have a stand. We want to stand for our book, or like we want, you know, our book to be here, like we'll pay you you know, whatever deal it is that they make.
Right.
Because then you've got the people at Barnes & Noble who will come in and tell the managers like, okay, this book needs to be featured here and this book needs to be featured here. Like that's a whole like job itself. I mean, that's how it is in retail anyway. Like They come in and they say, okay, this product needs to be moved forward because it's new. This one we're rebranding, so push it forward, like things like that. So I would say in the corporate world, it probably is something like that.
Right. And with Barnes & Noble, it being so big, that's probably way up at the top too. I don't even know if it gets down to the manager of the actual stores.
Well, I'm saying that's what I'm saying. Like the managers are doing what they're told to do.
Right.
Yeah, because somebody at the top, they're like visual merchandiser or whatever is coming in and being like, that's what it is in retail. Okay, this needs to be here. This needs to be here because they're being told like, oh, this is what we're pushing right now. This is what needs to be in front. We made this deal with this person, so it needs to be over here, you know, type of thing.
And I think it also might have to do with location, because I did see some videos where, because a lot of people were going in, well, let's go see where they put Oathbound. There's a lot of videos like that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them were, you know, it was on a small table in the back, but a couple of them, there were some end caps, not at the front, but maybe in about the middle of the store or so. Mm-hmm. So it could be where you're located to. So I'm in Tennessee. Everybody knows, you know, plenty of racism here in Tennessee. So when you go in my store, my local Barnes and Noble, the first books you see, okay, I do see James, which is a book we just read, right? And it's right there in the front, but that's because it won some big awards, right? Like the Booker Awards are really a big award.
Yeah.
And also, I think it was picked as, I think it won an award through Barnes and Noble. Like I don't know what it is, but it said something about a Barnes and Noble best book or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you see other books like Onyx Storm, but you also see shit like Trump books and Melania's book right there in the front because, you know, that's where I'm at, right? In
Because they're
Tennessee.
going to sell. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I think that might have something to do with it as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is a lot. I think it's a lot of that. I think that's a huge part of it. Not to say that it's right.
Right. No.
It's not right, per se. But that just is the corporate world. It's just capitalism. It's just the way it is. Yeah. They're going to push the books that they know are going to sell and in that region more so than they are going to other books. And I think, if a publisher isn't doing enough to push your book, then it's not going to be where it needs to be or where it should be.
It's a shame too, because like I said, it is a good series. I don't really read a lot of YA books, but I did like that one.
I do remember you at least telling me about them.
Yeah.
So, okay, well then I guess I'll just have to support. I'll have to read those books at some point.
Yeah, they're pretty good. I'm going to read the third one eventually. I didn't get it right away, but kind of got my TBR planned out for at least like the first half of the year. So I might read it later on this year. Well, let's move on to our book that we are currently reading. Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. Give us a recap of what we talked about last week.
Okay. Last week's chapters had us on a hero's journey. It started with the story of Zelu falling out of a dead tree, leading to loss of function in her legs. She meets Hugo Wagner, who says he can give her exos that will make her walk again using AI technology. She tells her family and Mrs. E, who are unsupportive, but she decides to go through with the study anyway. After extensive training, she's successful in learning to use them and walks through the airport with them, is seen, and is posted on social media. Her family is embarrassed by this, and she decides to move out of her parents' house. All the while, the movie adaptation of Rusted Robots is about to be released, and character names and settings seem to have changed. Zelu goes to the premiere and sees firsthand how they have Americanized her story, changing the characters' names to Yankee and Dot and setting it in America instead of Nigeria. She hates the movie and even says so to the richest man in the world, Jack Preston. She then goes on an interview with a renowned journalist who calls her out on rejecting the identity of a person with disabilities, and Zelu claps back, says it's her life and she's no one's robot, says her book is better than the movie, and she's canceled online. Upset, Mississy takes her to Joshua Tree to meet his friends Marlo and Wind. It is here that Wind tells her she can be whoever she wants to be and basically to reclaim her own story. There were 2 interviews in these chapters, one with Hugo and one with her brother Tolu. Hugo recounts a moment with Zelu learning about each other's stories of how they became disabled, and he notes how hard Zelu always was on herself. Her brother Tolu recounts the first time they got high together on a visit to family in Africa, where he gives some insight of the family dynamics, the harshness, and patriarchal values in the family. Meanwhile, in Rusted Robots, Ajeli starts out still stuck in Ankara and becomes a little more philosophical and existential as she connects to humanity through Ankara. Later, Ngozi finds a way to release Ajeli, but the connection they have is not broken. Ankara still has not left to tell other Humes, if any exist, about the destruction of the Earth out of comfort with Ngozi and fear of the unknown. Ajeli comes back to tell her she knows about the terrible information and that she should leave. Ngozi dies, Ajeli asks for loyalty, and Ankara has a dream of Ngozi telling her to leave and tell the information, so she does.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot happened.
It was a lot.
Well, and it's like, because there's 3 different stories going on, too. So
yeah, right.
Got to break them down in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. We do have some listener feedback. So Jay on Discord said she's not much of a sci-fi fan, but she's listened to chapters 1 through 13, and she's starting to enjoy it. So she's a little bit behind us, but she changed positions at her job. And from her Blue Sky account, I gather she got promoted and moved from the library she was working at to be in charge of another library branch. So good for her.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Congrats.
I think she's like a manager of a library. I think she says it's a smaller library than what she was working at before, but that's cool. Because we love libraries.
We do.
Which means, punk-ass book jockeys.
I have a week overdue book sitting on my shelf right now.
We could never work at Pawnee Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
So she said she feels bad for Zelu because her family gives her no support, which, yes, we agree with. She enjoys the interviews and pointed out that if they are being interviewed because because Zelu is dead, she would expect more positivity from the interviews. Yeah, you would think so. But the one with her sister, she said, pointed out flaws, and her dad's interview was mostly about himself. So yeah, that's a good point. Maybe Zayla's not dead. I don't know at this point.
Yeah, we don't know. I don't really
yeah,
have.
we're like at this point, I'm 3/4 of the way through and not sure yet.
The only guess I have is that she does end up going to space, and then something happens, and she's maybe stuck up there, or did die up there, or something. That's my guess.
That's my current guess too. After what happened with the. Well, we'll see. We haven't got to that. We haven't talked about that part yet, but it's coming up here.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, I do have another guess, but
okay.
But I can't share it yet.
Okay. Well, we'll hold on to that.
Because we'll have to wait until the end of these chapters.
Okay. And then Jay, she also said that Mazizi's app is creepy, which we didn't really talk much about that, but I agree. Like, that app seems to know a lot more than it should.
I hate that app. I would hate that. No. I agree. I think it was so. Yeah. I also and the example that Jay you gave in Discord too. I also was like, yeah, I felt the same way. I was like, that was like so weird. Like it was like, this seems urgent. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, yeah, like, that's what she said. Yeah.
Don't read my stuff.
Right. That's like, because I use AI on my iPhone, and if you get multiple messages from someone, the AI will kind of, when you look at your little, when you pull up the front and it's showing you what messages you have, it will like kind of do a summary of them all. And I don't really like that either.
Oh, I should turn that off. I don't even know if I think I went in and told it not to do that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's weird.
Well, so, I'm not a fan of AI, so as we all know, we're all well aware at this point.
Yeah. So Jay also says she doesn't like rusted robots, but she also said she wasn't a big sci-fi fan, so that's understandable. Thanks for that feedback, Jay. We appreciate it, and hopefully, it's not killing you too much to read a sci-fi book. It sounds like she's listening to it. So, all right, chapter 29. I just want to say up front before we start these chapters, I didn't really like any of these chapters much. I didn't like the way the book kind of went off in a different direction, and it does kind of skip a couple of years. But we'll get to that. But anyway, I just wanted to say that up front. So I may not have a lot to say on these chapters because when I was writing the outline, I was just like, ugh. I just didn't even want to do it.
Yes, which I could tell.
Yeah.
And was informed later.
Yeah.
But lucky for you guys, I have a lot to say.
That's good. Yeah, I was having a hard, because usually I do it on Sunday morning, and I was just having a hard time, and I was like, I just don't even want to do this today. And I didn't end up doing it until like yesterday, or maybe even finished it off today. But anyway, chapter 29, Rusted Robe. This is a Rusted Robots chapter. Ankara makes it to Cross River City. Ijele has not returned to Ankara, and she's wondering why. And we do know it's a she now, because somewhere in here, one of these chapters, it talks about her body, her robot body was built off of a female.
Yeah, I have a feeling Ijele is probably also part of the other side's war. I'm sure she's doing something in the Ghost War. That's probably why she's not going back and forth. I mean, that's just my guess.
Right.
Yeah, but then also in this chapter, there's a service bot. She goes to this grove. I think she comes across like kind of like a grave site, maybe memorial or something. But the service bot at its Osun Asogbo Grove says it has obtained the ultimate boon of its journey. So I thought, oh, another hero's journey reference here. And then it tells her, you, at the other hand, seem to be at the beginning of yours. And Ankara says she has no idea what it's talking about, which I thought was interesting since she's a scholar of human knowledge and stories in particular. So you'd think she's read how to read literature like a professor, like we all have here.
Right.
Like, how does she not know about the hero's journey? She's like, I had no idea what he was talking about. It's like, you don't know about the ultimate boon in the hero's journey? That's interesting to me. Why would she not know that?
Yeah.
I feel like there's got to be a reason.
especially being a scholar and collecting stories. Yeah, that
Yeah,
doesn't make much
exactly.
sense.
I'm like, so she should have read both of those books about the
Maybe she
hero.
just meant
Right.
maybe she just meant that she didn't know what that thing's ultimate boon was that it has already achieved, but and doesn't know what her ultimate boon could possibly be. I don't know.
I don't know. She just seemed very like, this guy sounded crazy to me. So moving on. But yeah, and then I also like the imagery in this chapter of the pollen on her. And she says she's like covered in pollen and she's like, it is good onward, which is this moment, I think, where she's thinking about Ngozi. But she says, it is good onward, which is a callback to Tyrone
Oh yeah,
because she
I
said
missed
that to
that.
him. Yeah, she said that to him at the hospital. So it's another, I mean,
Mhm.
and he's the one who said he felt like a
Rusted
rusted old
robot.
robot.
Yep.
So he's had a lot of influence on this book. This is definitely a relationship that she thinks about a lot. So it would be interesting to see him come back in some way if he does.
Mm.
But yeah, interesting to think that he's had like he was a big. I think her time in the hospital and him in particular is a big inspiration for this story.
Right. Yeah, I think so. All right, moving on to chapter 30. So we fast forward 1 year. The Rusted Robots film was a massive hit. Zaylu gets an email from Jack Preston asking if she would like to travel to the International Space Station on one of his ships. She thinks about how her family will react if she decided to go through with it and thinks her dad will be on her side this time. She also discusses this with Mizizi, who tells her she should go. Then she gets a phone call.
Yeah, they also talk a lot about she's really putting off writing her second book.
Yeah.
And to me, going to space also seems like a really good way for her to put it off even more.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah. And I think because she's getting tired of her fans too, being like, and her everybody pressuring her to write the second book. So now she's like, just go to space. And then she ends up getting this email to tell her that she should go to space. And so I was like, wow, what a wonderful reason for her to keep not writing this book. Honestly, I think about that a lot. I'm like, if I ever wrote a series, that would be hard for me too. Like I hate feeling pressured. If I had a book that could be a series, I would probably try and write the whole series before I even sent it to a publisher, just so I didn't have to deal with that. Because there's just no way. Being pressured to do
Yeah.
something is not how I operate.
Well, as long as you're not George R. R. Martin or Patrick Rothfuss, fine. That might work.
Right. But yeah, I also really felt how close she was, or maybe wished she was, to her dad in this chapter, because they were so similar in wanting adventure and telling stories. She talks about this, but she still feels like a disappointment because he had more of an engineer brain while she does things more impulsively. So I'm just thinking a lot about her relationship to her dad after this chapter. And he tells the story earlier in his interview, earlier in the book, about swimming with the dolphins and everybody calling him crazy. And then when she talks about him in this chapter, she says that he almost flunked out of his second year of college because he was tending to his garden. But Zaylu sees all these qualities she has from her dad as bad while simultaneously looking up to him for these qualities. And I wonder if her dad felt similar, like admired her for all of the adventurous qualities that she had and the storytelling that he also liked to do, but maybe felt shame in them. And maybe especially in her because she's a girl and girls shouldn't be that way according to their culture, society in general. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and she's very hopeful that he's the one that will understand her wanting to go to space. And when I read this chapter and she was thinking that, I was thinking that he probably would understand, but I don't know if he would have been able to express it.
Right. Because, and I see what you're saying there. Maybe he admired her for her adventurous qualities, but he also felt more, maybe not shame, but maybe also shame, but more that because he's the head of the household, he has to do the so-called quote unquote right thing.
Right.
And not be an adventurous type or get into more creative things. And instead he has to be the one to, make money to support the family.
Yeah, and I think
because could you imagine if his wife made more money than him? Could you imagine that? So
right.
I know you said you didn't watch the Lord Gaga sketch, but that comes into play there. So you got to watch that.
Okay, yes. I do plan on watching Lady Gaga SNL. I just haven't had the time yet. But yeah, so I think that her dad and her a lot of the same qualities. I think there are a lot of reasons why they both feel like they shouldn't have those qualities. And they see those qualities in each other. And he, like you said, I think it is. I think it's like, well, I can't be that way because I have to be the head of the family. And she can't be that way because it's too impulsive, it's too brash, it's too this. Like she said in this chapter, like every time she does something, she gets bit, she gets stung, and it's always her fault. Like she's like, that's always on, but I do it anyway, I think is what she says. So it's very interesting dynamic, I feel like.
Yeah. Chapter 31, interview with Zelu's mother. She talks mostly about her past and how she and her husband met. And then in the very last paragraph, she brings it back around to Zelu. So it's almost like, I don't know, kind of like her father's interview where it was mostly about him and not Zelu. So I don't know.
Yeah, but
I mean, she brought it back, but
well, now that I'm thinking about it and just based off of what I was just talking about, I'm like, I wonder if it's because, like her and her dad did have so many similar qualities to each other. So when her dad is thinking about Zelu, he's also thinking about himself. And when her mom is thinking about Zelu, she's thinking about Secret.
Yeah, I can see that.
So maybe that's kind of what that's about.
Right, because she says that, she says all of this to show why Zelu is the way she is. That's what she says in the last paragraph.
Right, yeah. She also said in the interview that she read Zelu's book as soon as she got one of the early copies. But earlier in the book, Zelu said that she didn't. She was saying, like, none of my family's read the book. They still haven't read the book. They still haven't said anything to me. So I wonder here if Zelu's perception of her parents and their feelings towards her are a little skewed, or if her parents are romanticizing their relationship. I'm a little unsure of this, but I lean towards more Zelu's perception might be a little bit skewed. And I think it's because she did have this huge traumatic event at a very, very young age and I'm sure her parents were very, very overprotective of her because of that. And also felt some of that embarrassment and that shame that they didn't necessarily need to feel, but felt anyway. So because of this, there's this idea of like, she just felt, and I think especially when you're a child and especially at that age, when you're 12 and like a preteen teenager, feeling controlled by your parents already sucks in general. So to also not be able to walk and this happening at that stage in time probably felt even more overbearing.
Right, because she had to rely on them more than she really wanted to.
Yeah, especially at that age, especially in adolescence in that way, because that's when you're like really craving independence the most.
Right.
So I wonder if like that kind of has an effect on how she views her parents, but then also her parents still like wanting to feel this like control over her because they don't necessarily like understand her either, and they probably do feel very overprotective of her because she's disabled. So, but I think that's really interesting. So now I'm starting to kind of read Zelu's story in a different light because I feel like she's just so deep in her insecurities that there's a lot she does tend to play victim when maybe she's not necessarily, or it's not as dramatic as it seems.
Yeah, and those parts of the book are from Zelu's point of view. So, that's what we're getting is her point of view. So maybe it is skewed and we don't see that part yet.
Yeah.
All right, chapter 32. So now we're going to go to the part where the phone call happened at the end of chapter 30. And the phone call was about her father being in the hospital. He had had a heart attack and he ends up passing away in the hospital. And then some of his brothers, their uncles, come from Nigeria demanding that Secret be buried there in Nigeria. And there's a whole thing about that and how they come there and they don't really ask, they kind of demand. And this is more of showing how things work in the families in Nigeria and how their customs and culture is. Yeah,
and I think especially the Igbo tribe sounds very, very, very patriarchal. Very, very men are in charge and he has to be buried in his motherland and we don't care like how you feel. Because there's even, I don't know if it's in these chapters or if it's later in the chapters, but they talk about too how like the widow gets treated at the Igbo funerals and how it's like really demeaning, and I think she's like put in practically like a cage or something. So that really sucked because her mother is like, I am a princess.
Right.
Like, you cannot treat me this way. Cannot talk like this is my husband. So it's just so like, it's just so sad how powerless they all feel in that moment.
Yeah. Chapter 33. This is the wake in the United States for Secret. Towards the end of this, the mother gets up and starts dancing. I know you say that it's beautiful. I thought it was pretty cool too that she did that. But go ahead. I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, because it's what do they call it? The masquerade.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
masquerade.
the masquerade comes in, and so then they start drumming and everything, and yeah, I thought that was really beautiful because she feels, because they do this at a lot of I feel like a lot of funerals, like indigenous funerals and tribal funerals, that always feel more like not necessarily a celebration, but a celebration in some way. They like the drums and the music and everything.
Well, yeah, I think it is a celebration. I think they're celebrating the life that that person
Right.
had. And I think that's kind of a thing in when you think about New Orleans, they do that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, they do, don't they? Yeah, because it's really
Yeah,
tied into those Haitian roots, and like
right. Yeah,
Black indigenous roots. So a lot of the women start dancing and wailing too, and like expressing their grief, which, like I said before, it sounds like in Igbo culture, like in the funeral that they would go to in Nigeria, they wouldn't be allowed to do that. I like that they are able to express their grief in such a way, because even in our culture, our funerals for the most part are so buttoned up, and everyone has to keep their emotions in check even when someone like so close to them has died. And even I think even in this one, they're like, "Mom, it's okay to be sad," but she's like still has this like smile on her face because she has to greet the society women or
right.
whatever. So there's this like culture clash of, and this like clash of like, I need to be presentable in this way, but also I'm dealing with all of this grief. So her being so moved by this masquerade and to dancing and wailing, and then everybody being called to do it, was really cool, and it was a really nice. I'm glad that the author wrote about that experience of grief.
Yeah, it was good. I did like that chapter out of all of them. That was probably the best one for me. Although I do like the Rusted Robots chapters too, though. So, but
Yeah, I
I
like
don't know.
Rusted Robots. I wish there was more of it. I'm like,
Yeah, I think my main problem with these chapters was it just to me kind of went off in a different direction than I was expecting. So it's probably just a me problem, which there's always me problems.
yeah, we're on it. We're on an internal journey right now.
Yeah, I'm old and set in my ways and expect certain things, I guess.
But I understand.
Chapter 34, she declines the offer from Jack Preston to go to the International Space Station, but the chapter of this title is not yet. So maybe she will eventually accept that offer later on down the road. The family goes to Nigeria for the funeral there, other than Zelu, and I think one of her other sisters didn't go as well. Another year goes by, so now we've gone fast forwarded 2 years, another thing I didn't really like. Like, there's a lot of unanswered things could have happened in those 2 years, like being canceled online. We don't really hear anything else about that. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah. Well, I think with the cancellation, I think people probably just got over it, as people tend to do.
Yeah, well,
And like
true.
it said in chapter 30 that she's been off socials and she's not doing many
Right.
interviews.
Okay, but I have one thing to say also that you had brought up before was if you were a super fan of her book and the way they changed the movie, you'd think you'd have a problem with that and there would be more of that going on, at least for a while.
Yeah, you would
I don't
think
know.
that. But I think since we're coming from Zelu's point of view, and because she did decide to lay low and not be on socials and stuff, we're not going to hear much about that. Also, it sounds like she really doesn't, I don't know if she really cares about her fans in that way. Like, I don't think she
Yeah,
cares. Like, I just
that's
don't, I don't think she cares. I think she's annoyed by them. I think she didn't want any of this. I don't think she wanted fame. It's giving Chapel Roan. I don't know if you know the discourse with Chapel
I
Roan,
don't. I
but
don't.
like Chapel Roan like blew up. She became this huge pop star overnight. I mean, not overnight because she did work really, really hard, but then she went from like being like someone who was kind of well known to like now everybody's obsessed with Chapel Roan, and she hates it. She hates fame.
Huh.
Like she hates it because she wasn't expecting to blow up in such a way, and it was
Mm.
really, and that is really detrimental to, I feel like, your well-being. I think if you are suddenly
Yeah.
go from not
Yeah.
really being perceived to being perceived by the entire world, and therefore being scrutinized by a bunch of
Right.
strangers, and then also being expected, because a lot of people have this idea that, oh no, these artists need to just get over it, and like they wouldn't be anywhere without their fans, and they need to give us that. It's just like this constant like, no, you need to be producing more music, you need to be doing more of this, you need to be going to these things. And it's like that she's still a person, she's allowed to do whatever she wants. Like artists, you're
Yeah.
just because you're a fan doesn't mean you're entitled to her work all of the time at any time that you want it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, which I think is a lot of this too. I think Zaylu's just annoyed, and that's why she doesn't really want to write this book, because she's feeling pressured and these fans are constantly like bugging her about it. So she's like, you know what, I'm just gonna back off. And then also, yeah, and so I think they just kind of all forgot about it. I think probably because it was such a success, and I think because she laid low, and then they just start demanding like more and more and more from her. I also know that there are like so many times when my friends will bring up a person, and then I'm like, didn't they get canceled like a while back? And everyone will be like, oh yeah. And then we move on because we don't really care. Especially if it's something like what Zaylu got canceled for and not something super serious like sexual assault allegations or something.
Right.
Like if it's something like that big, then we're like, oh no, that person's canceled for life. But if somebody just like said something in a moment and it was like a really big deal at that time, but then you forget about it a couple years later, it's just kind of like whatever. Because we're human. We all say stupid shit. Like I can't, that's what I've said before. Like, please don't read through my text messages. Don't look through my old stuff. Don't quote me on anything, because I probably have said cancelable things because I'm a person, because I'm a human being. Like, because if I were in that interview too and that girl was coming at me like that, I probably would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
I'd have been like, back off. So yeah, so I understand what you're saying. I mean, yeah, it's like you do want more from that, but I think maybe the author just decided to touch more on the like, yeah, whatever, like people get canceled and then people forget about it and they just demand from these artists.
Yeah, and you're right. And the Zaylu cancellation to me wasn't as big a deal anyway as something else like you said, like sexual assault allegations or whatever. So yeah,
it's just something that they could be excited about for like a month, and then somebody else does something equally or worse.
Yeah. Move on to the next thing.
Cancelable, and then it's like everybody cares about that, because Travel Roan's been almost canceled like 20 times in the past year, and people still eat her crap up. So it's like whatever until somebody sexually harasses somebody, it's like whatever. Or is a Zionist or something, like the big things like that. But also in this chapter, she's having some really nice healing moments with her mom. She gets her mom to like ride in the fancy space car. And her mom like goes and gets her hair done. Well, the mom is like scared, like out of her mind.
She was,
like she's like, I can't believe you're making me do this. She's like, just do it. So she gets her to do that, which is kind of crazy, because I mean, that's a big step for her mom to do. And that feels like feels very healing for their relationship, like her trusting Zaylu, which she hasn't before, you know?
Right.
And she gets her, and Zaylu like takes her and like pays to get her hair done. I think it's in these moments that, because I think that it's also like this, she was like hosting something with her society women all there. And so she has to like present a certain way. So I think Zaylu is really starting to see why her mom is so rigid all of the time, feels like why she has to be a certain way. Her mom, it feels like, is trying as much as she can to also let those things go as much as she can in her own way, because she's set in her ways because she's older. But it feels like this, and again, this could probably tie back to, you know, the similarities between Zaylu and her dad. Sounds like her mom is trying to connect a little bit more with Zaylu, probably because Zaylu reminds her the most of Secret.
Yeah.
So I think that's really nice. I thought that was really lovely.
Yeah.
I really liked that. Now, of course, she's still kind of a little bit controlling, because she's still got, you know, however many, probably like 60, 70 years of stuff to unlearn. But I can feel her starting to really try.
All right. Chapter 35 is another Rusted Robots chapter. And in this chapter, we meet Oga Chukwu, who is the leader of the Humes in Cross River City. And Kara tells them about the terrible information, and no one seems to really care because it was a distant threat. But instead, they prepare for a war with the ghosts.
Yeah, I think that will definitely come to bite them in the ass, as Kara pointed out. And she even brought up like climate change and humanity, ignoring the bigger issue there. But
which
then
we are continuing to ignore now.
Right. So she resolves to like climbing up the ranks to get their respect, so that she can hopefully be the one leading the charge of, because she has the information of what's going on, you know? So.
Right. Yeah, because at the end of that chapter, she's a general in their army. All right, chapter 36, Zaylu goes to Nigeria with Hugo, Uchenna, and Marcy. Zaylu goes swimming and runs into some dolphins outside of Lagos.
Another like sweet moment and a connection to her dad.
Yeah.
Like the dolphin was her dad type of deal.
Right. Yeah.
Her dad sent the dolphin.
Right.
Yeah.
And then chapter 37, interview with Bola, one of Zaylu's younger sisters. And in this interview, she tells a story of Uncle Pius, which is what he calls himself, right? Even though it's pious.
Pious.
Yeah, he calls himself Uncle Pius, even though it's pious, that they run into while they're out for a walk. It's one thing Pius says to Zelu, you know, he talks a bunch of shit about her being crippled and stuff. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then towards the end of this interview, Bola actually mentions Seth, so we do get confirmation that it's the Seth guy who's doing all these interviews.
Mm-hmm. Also, when you think about it too, like he was doing these interviews while Secret was still alive, or at least like some of them were.
I wanted to talk about that actually, because
at least some of them were, maybe not all of them, but some of them.
In that interview, the very first, the second interview of the book is with Secret, her father.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about something about what Zelu does, like it's a bad thing. Because that's where we were thinking maybe Zelu's dead, right? Because of these interviews and the way they were talking about her.
Mm-hmm.
But he's already dead now. Before Zelu has done anything, she's still around. So she hasn't either died or gone to space or whatever the hell is going to end up happening to her, if anything. So yeah, that confused me a little bit. So some of these interviews have already been conducted while Zelu is alive, obviously.
Yeah, I think it sounds like the parents' interview definitely were before, but then some of the siblings' interviews talk about her in the past tense.
Yeah,
because I think.
But in the one with her father, though, he said why there was something in there. I wish I had the book in front of me so I could look it up. There was something in there about I don't know why Zelu did what she did.
Yeah,
something similar to that. So,
but maybe he wasn't talking about how. Maybe he wasn't talking about how she potentially dies. Maybe he's just talking about like her exos or
maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the timeline's getting a little questionable there.
Yeah,
so we'll see how that all ties up eventually. Also, there's a point too before she goes to Africa where she says like, I wish I would have listened to him, because they're all telling her she shouldn't go to Africa, right? Like she shouldn't go to Nigeria because she's super famous and all these things could happen and whatever. And there's a point too where she says like, if I had known, like I wouldn't have gone. Do you remember that? She says that. She said, I think she's talking like maybe Miss Easy was telling her like, I wish you wouldn't go. And she was kind of like blah, 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 blah about it. But then she says like, and had I known, I wouldn't have went. She does. Yeah, I caught that. I was like, oh, interesting. So that's where I was saying in the beginning, because she does say that at some point. I remember I should have marked it. But so in the beginning when I was like, oh, I have another theory. I'm like, oh, something might happen in Africa. Something is going to happen in Africa because she said that.
Maybe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like something bad is going to happen in Africa.
Yeah, because she's still in Africa now, because chapter 38, after this interview, she actually goes to her father's area of Africa to visit his grave.
Yeah, and I was going to, starting with chapter 8, like we see why it's a bit dangerous for her to be in Nigeria. She gets harassed by these two men, like when she's in the hotel. These men start harassing her. But then her auntie comes in to tell them off. And that's when her aunt and uncle take her to the dad's part of Nigeria. But yeah, so I do think something bad is going to happen in Africa, because she did say something, which also was interesting part of the narrative, because I'm like, oh, if it's her, like her saying like, I wish I would have listened to him. I'm like, kind of like, okay, so who's writing this story? And like, is she like, who? Because it's also in third person. So I'm kind of like, what's going on here? Like, why would she think that? That's such an interesting kind of like breaking the fourth wall moment in the book that we haven't had on her end in that part of the story. But anyway, so chapter 38, she's getting harassed by these men. Her aunt comes to tell them off. Her aunt and uncle are much more supportive of her endeavors and saying that since she rewrote her narrative, her parents didn't know what to do. So again, alluding to the fact that when they can't control her, they can't understand her, I thought.
Right.
So yeah, I thought this very interesting dynamic, her aunt and uncle, or the first aunt and uncle, because then she meets another uncle who's like, I don't know, what are you doing? You shouldn't have done that. And then the aunt and uncle are like, if you weren't crippled, you wouldn't think of doing that too. And she's like, oh my God. It's like, you're defending me, but also you called me crippled. So
right. Yeah. Like
So yeah, but the first aunt and uncle are much more like receptive to her and more understanding and supportive of her.
And then Zelu goes to visit her father's grave in his home village, and she runs into Uncle Pius again. He says some very ableist and misogynistic things to her.
I love Uncle P. He's crazy. He's like a sexist, ableist version of Rafiki in The Lion King to me. That's like how I picture him.
Yeah,
The
but you shouldn't
baboon.
love him for that.
No, but it's not. I don't love him because he's sexist and ableist. I love him because he's just so blatantly sexist and ableist, and he's just funny. He just like says whatever's on his mind. He just doesn't care. He's like But then he's also like, I read the book. It was great. It was fun. It was well written, and you're meddling in things you shouldn't be meddling in, and this, that, and the, I don't know. And then he comes and he's like covered in the red because he's been dealing with the palm oil, and she's like, "What have you been doing?" And he's just like covered in palm oil. Like, I just really imagined Rafiki from The Lion King, but like a really crazy, sexless, ableist version of Rafiki from The Lion King, because he's saying these like crazy things. Some of them are kind of wise, but like kind of not really.
Right.
I don't know. It's just he's very kooky to me. I'm like, okay, this is an interesting character that like is telling her probably things she should hear, but in a really funny, silly way.
I think he says something about you shouldn't be doing that because you're a woman or something.
Yeah, and he's like, or just crazy. Like messing in things you shouldn't be messing around in and stuff. But I don't know. He was giving me like crazy, like off the rocker, like Rafiki vibes. So I thought he was funny. And I liked the idea of him like covered in palm oil.
Yeah, that was weird. I didn't know palm oil was red.
I don't think I knew.
I'm assuming it looks like he's been covered in blood or something, and it's palm oil. It's, I guess, a red color.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he was like, I bet you think I've been killing chickens and stuff.
Right.
And
yeah,
she's
exactly.
like, yeah, I was thinking that. He's like, I was dealing with palm oil. That's just how I imagine him talking. I thought he was a funny character. I just feel like he's and he just like randomly pops up. So to me, it feels very like weird little kooky guy. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. He's definitely out there. So that leaves us leaving off here where she's still in Africa, and we will see what happens from here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. We have to see what happens. Does she die? How is she gonna die? What's gonna happen in Africa? Is she gonna go to space?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the end to see what the hell happens, because I'm lost at this point. Because at first, at the beginning of the book, I thought she's gonna die. Now I think she's gonna end up going to space, and so I don't know what the hell's going on at this point.
Yeah, but I feel like something bad's gonna happen in Africa. So
yeah. That's a possibility too, and she may not even get to go to space. Who knows? We shall see.
We're gonna find out.
Yeah.
Because that wraps up our discussion on Death of the Author, chapters 29 through 38. And we're almost at the finish line. The next episode will be covering the final chapters, 39 to the end. So don't miss it.
In just 2 weeks, we'll be starting our next read, Watermoon. So now's the perfect time to grab a copy and get ready to dive in with us. Splash.
As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts, whether it's about today's discussion, your favorite moments, or what you think of the book so far. Join the conversation on Discord, TikTok, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time.
Our intro music is Upbeat Funk, performed by Mikhail Smusev, and our outro music is Lo-Fi Chill, medium version, performed by Bodan Kuzman. You can find both tracks on pixabay.com. Thanks for joining us, family, and we'll see you next week.